Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Easy 11 Plus live lesson. It's wonderful to see you all, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook. As always, remember that there are lots of useful links in the video description, including free resources, and the video description is down here on YouTube and up here on Facebook. And Eid Mubarak. And if anybody's missing this lesson because of Eid, of course, you can always rewatch it tomorrow or any other day. Now, I've been away for a few days, so I haven't prepared a full live lesson on an English, maths or reasoning topic as I normally do. Instead, lots of people recently have asked me to do a Q&A session. So that's what this week is. Lots of people have been in touch over the last couple of days with their questions. And if you've got questions that you want to add during the lesson, write them in the comments and I'll see whether I can fit some of those in as well. I've got loads of questions here. I probably won't get through all of them. I'm going to try and move through quite quickly and make my answers as useful as possible. And I'm just going to go through in the order that I received the questions. So that's going to be including questions that are very relevant and questions that are sometimes of slightly dubious relevance. Right, let's get started. Of course, this week is all about hello to Martin Fung, who says, I'm eating. I hope you enjoy your meal. Right, okay. The first question I've got to answer today is from Anna Maria. And Anna Maria wants to know about learning vocabulary. And this is a very, very common question that people ask all the time. She wants to know, how do you improve vocabulary with synonyms and antonyms with such a short time left before the exam? Do you just learn them by heart, like memorizing a poem? And she's a bit worried that that isn't a very efficient way to learn vocabulary. I think that can be right. We have different learning methods. For some people, memorizing things is really effective. And if that's you, then do it. And as with pretty much all education, it's about finding the methods that work well for you and learning to make the most of those. In general, by far the most important thing with vocabulary is that you use it. And the most effective way that you by yourself can improve your vocabulary is to take new words that you find when you read or you hear them and make lists of them and then practice using them in your writing. Whether that's writing, messages to friends even, but particularly when you're writing stories and essays, comprehension answers, try to work in your new vocabulary, see where words are most effective, where they help, and by using them, they will come to stick in your mind. With your family and your friends, practice using new words, do it with a smile, see what they think. All these things will help to fix them. The main thing with vocabulary is that you use it. One thing I would say about vocabulary for the 11 plus is that you can never hope to learn all the words out there that might be useful. Even as an adult, you can't really hope to know everything. The English language is enormous. So yes, you should be learning new words, but the most important thing is that you get used to making the most of the vocabulary that you already know. And Anna Maria mentions in this question synonyms and antonyms. Well, synonyms and antonyms are very, very rarely sort of fixed word pairs like up and down. Normally, there are lots of different options. There are lots of possible antonyms for a word. For example, big. Antonyms can be small, tiny, minute, insignificant, and so on. So get used to using the words that you know, being flexible with them, and you'll get much better at this kind of question. Right, on to the next one. So the next question is from Lauren, who says, I would really like some tips on improving speed, especially in math. This is something I talk about a lot, so you'll find more advice on this in many of my other videos. Normally, speed is not actually a matter of speed, it's a matter of skills. There are things in your work that are holding you up. To take an example in maths, because Lauren asked about maths, often people are slowed down by the fact that they have poor times tables. So every time they have to multiply something, it takes a little bit too long. Or their paper calculation methods aren't good. Every time they have to add things together, it takes a bit too long. Make sure that your core skills are really good and your speed will improve. When you're doing papers, try to identify the points where you're getting slowed down. What skills are weak there? What do you need to work on? The one thing that won't improve your speed probably is just trying to work faster and faster, because you'll tend to make the same mistakes more and more quickly, and that is not a useful way to approach an exam. Next one. Okay, what's the best way to answer spatial reasoning questions, nets and cubes, and no matter what technique I use, it doesn't seem to apply to most questions, just some. This is from Sufyan. I really feel your pain. this is a really difficult situation where you keep learning things, and then every time you get a new question, it isn't quite the same, and you feel you can't quite apply the knowledge that you've learnt. I think the thing is that as you practice, don't just think about what's the technique for this particular kind of question. Think, what lessons am I learning? And don't just look for your mistakes and try to work out what you're doing wrong. That's important. But also, when you get things right, try to work out why you're getting them right. What sorts of things are you doing in your mind? What processes are you applying? So with reasoning questions, yes, different question styles require different techniques, and there are many, many question styles. But there are some techniques that carry through everything. Are you good at breaking a question down into little units? So if you're talking about spatial reasoning, are you good at looking at different parts of a shape as it moves through a sequence and seeing how that part of the shape changes? Are you used to breaking it down? How is it rotating? How are the patterns on it changing? That kind of thing. So get used to breaking things down and identify the good things that you do as well as the bad things, and try to learn from them so that you can do them again in the future. Right, let's look at some questions in the comments. Someone says, do I need to go to summer school? My mum's making me. I would think that if your mum really wants you to go to this summer school, it's probably because there's something very useful about it. So go to the summer school and make the most of it. These opportunities are what you make of them. If you go there with a really positive frame of mind, trying to learn everything you can, it could be a really useful experience. I doubt you're going to have to go to summer schools every summer for the rest of your life. It's something you need to do now to help you at this point, to help you make the most of the opportunities ahead, probably the 11 plus exam. So do it positively and make the most of it. That would be my advice. Someone says non-verbal is a waste of time. I agree with that. I think non-verbal reasoning is very much a waste of time. I think that people spend ages studying for these tests, which are very learnable. They aren't really a very good intelligence test. They're a test of how well you've learned to do non-verbal reasoning questions, and there are very few useful transferable skills. So yes, I agree with that. I think non-verbal reasoning is a colossal waste of time, but you've got to do it. So put a smile on your face and just make the most of it. Okay, right, let's look at the next question here. Question 4. From Zara, how many paper mocks should I give my child at home over the summer holidays? Once a week, every fortnight, and so on. So here's a question from a parent, and I'm sure there are plenty of parents watching as well as their children. How many? That's not really answerable. But what I would say is that you should be focusing on practicing skills. And if by mocks you mean doing time practice and worrying about the marks, I would keep that to a minimum. Occasional mocks can be useful for checking where you're up to and identifying problems. But I think slow, careful work where you develop skills, identify weaknesses and address them, identify strong points and make them even stronger, these things are much more valuable. And if you just do lots and lots of timed mocks, you're taking away time that could be used on those things, and you're probably introducing a lot of extra stress as well. So mocks are useful, but don't overdo them. That's my opinion. Others are available. Next question from Habib. How many hours of study should your child do per day in the holidays? It's quite a similar question, I suppose, in some ways. Well, obviously I don't have an answer to this. I'm not going to say, 3 hours, half an hour, 27 hours. Find a balance of work that maximizes learning, and that's something really that you can only do by talking to your child and cooperating with them insofar as that's possible, being a parent. But try to find a rhythm of work that helps them to learn the most. And some children work really well, for an extended period of time, and they can sit down for 3 hours and really make the most of it. Some children work well for 20 minutes, then need a break. Some children need a couple of days off each week. Some children prefer to keep doing a little bit of work every day. So I'm afraid my answer to this question is it depends on your situation. Don't listen to what other people do. Don't worry about what your friends or your friends' children are doing. Find a pattern of work that's effective and stick to that. And just focus on making the learning effective and positive. That's all you can do. And I'm afraid there is no magic answer to this. Sometimes you may find that a good pattern of work stops being a good pattern of work. It just builds up, it's too much stress. Maybe your child needs a break. Sometimes it might be useful to sit them down and say, now you need to work a bit harder. You've been playing a bit too much on the computer. And in that situation, maybe you increase the work a bit. Just be flexible, focus on learning skills, and as with all these things, don't get too hung up on worrying about the marks. Let's have a look at the comments again for a second. What are some tips to help get better at area, perimeter, and volume of regular and irregular shapes? I will do a video on that at some stage, probably within the next few weeks. I won't deal with it now because it's a bit too specific, but it's on my list of things to cover because several people have asked for it. What is an onomatopoeia? Bang is an onomatopoeia. It's a word that sounds like the thing it describes. Pretty simple. And well done for spelling it correctly. Many congratulations. Next question. I've got a multi-question here from Yusuf. What is the best way to revise? I think I've just given an answer to that, really, that it will depend on the person and you need to find a balance of revision and time that works for you. I also mentioned earlier that some people are really good at memorizing things from a list. Some people need to do everything in context by working with it. I think the most important thing is to mix things up, however. Even if you've got a way of revising that works well for you, don't just do that. Your brain will process things better if you give it lots of different ways of working, and also exams are not all the same. They include different kinds of tasks as well, and so having a mixed set of revision styles will prepare you well for what the 11 plus might actually throw your way. How do we stop making silly mistakes? That's the classic question. I think the most important thing is to find out where you tend to make silly mistakes, in what kind of situation, and work on those issues. I spoke about timing earlier on. I said you need to find things that slow you down. Silly mistakes don't tend to happen at random. We tend to make silly mistakes in the same sorts of situation. So find what those situations are, find the, as you put it, silly things that you tend to do, and work out your ways to stop doing them. This is something that you will have to take responsibility for, I'm afraid, because your silly mistakes are your own thing, and you'll need to fix them. One thing you can do, of course, is list every time you make a silly mistake. Have a book you keep them in or something, and that will show you what to look out for. This is especially true with silly mistakes in English. If you keep misspelling the same words, if you write down a list of your common spelling mistakes, your common grammatical mistakes, and so on, then you'll know what to check for after each piece of work, and after a while you won't make those mistakes in the first place. Last thing that Yusuf has asked, in multiple choice comprehension, MC means multiple choice, I think, I always get a similar score. What can I do to push my score higher? It's all a bit confusing and difficult. I would just refer you to my various videos on multiple choice comprehension in this channel. They should be a real help with that, because I talk about the techniques for doing it well and the systems you can have to avoid the common mistakes and give yourself the best chance of getting it right. If you go to the homepage of the Easy 11 Plus channel on YouTube, you'll see that I categorize all my videos by type. So there's a playlist for maths, for comprehension, for reasoning, for creative writing. So if you go to the comprehension playlist, you'll find all the multiple choice comprehension videos there, and you can watch them, and I hope they will answer your question for you. Good luck, and do let me know whether they do help. Flying through here, this is not so bad. Abby says, will you cover a lesson about angles? Yes, I will. Whoa, mega question from Mohammed. Thank you for taking the time to write this. You can't see me, really? Hello. I'm studying for the CEM. Lots of questions, not very much time. Yep, it is stressful, I agree. Verbal reasoning is the issue. I have to answer 80 questions in 50 minutes as a list of common topics in verbal reasoning. Yup. Do well when there's no time pressure, but in an exam it just goes berserk. Give you some tips. The main thing to say is watch my videos on verbal reasoning, where there are lots of tips about how to do this kind of thing. I don't think 80 questions in 50 minutes is as bad as it seems, because you'll get, say, a block of 10 questions in a certain style or something, and you'll get into the rhythm of them, and some of them will be very, very quick. Don't get bogged down on the hard questions. If a question looks like it's going to take ages, then it's a good idea to put a mark next to it and say, I'm going to come back to that later on, and that way you don't waste too much time for one mark and miss out loads of other marks later. But I think the most important thing really at the end of the day is you practice steadily and carefully, and get used to the skills that you're going to use. And the better your skills develop while working slowly and thoughtfully, the better you'll perform when you're under time pressure. It's as I said earlier on for time in what I think it was maths exams somebody mentioned. Just identify where you're slowing down, work on those skills, and gradually speed them up. Are you allowed to have a break in the 11 plus since COVID? I don't think the rules on breaks would have changed. Certainly in most exams you don't get a break. However, if you go for an exam day where there are several kinds of exam, you might get breaks in between. It will depend on the exam, it will depend on the school. There isn't a general answer to that, but I don't think that COVID will have much to do with it. Please could people not post the same question again and again and again, because it just means my comments fly through, I can't read them properly, and it means I can't see everybody else's comments. Stop asking me about breaks in the 11 plus, you know who you are. Whenever I do a mock, I do worse in the first attempt and better in the second attempt. How do I do well in the first attempt? Well, if you do better at the second attempt, it means you're learning. So keep practicing and learning. Do whatever it is that's helping you to get better at the second attempt. And as you do that, you'll do better at your first attempts. And as I said many times, slow down, work carefully, focus on the skills and not the marks, and don't do too much timed practice. Thank you for that question in the comments. On to the next question, not in the comments, next question from earlier. Someone sent to me in the last couple of days. Dear Robert, please can you go over triangular numbers? They don't come up often, but is there a quick formula to work it out? Rohan, a really interesting maths question. If you're asked to deal with triangular numbers, the exam will always give you the material to know what they are. You will not need a formula for working them out. Except very rarely a question might guide you through coming up with one, but that's not going to happen at 11 plus, I think, simple to say. Having said that, if you'd like to know more about this, and it would be wonderful if you did, I actually had a look when I saw this question. There's a really good article on this on a website called mathsisfun.com. If you Google maths is fun, one word, and triangular numbers, they've got a really nice page that exactly answers your question and tells you how to derive an expression for numbers in a triangular number sequence. So have a look at that, and I hope you find it very interesting. Next question, question 10. Shweta says, thank you for helping all of us with your YouTube sessions. Thank you. It was an interesting project to start with this year, and I really enjoyed it, and I really want to make these videos better and so on. So if you've got feedback about how to change them and how to improve things, you want more of this, you want less of that, you want different sections in the lessons, send me a message, send me an email, write comments under the videos, tell me what to change, and I will try to make these videos better and more useful. Right, onto the question. Can you please help me help my kid with synonyms and antonyms? I think I've dealt with that already. Just rewind the video and watch some of my earlier answers where I say as much as I can in this really compressed format about this. There's more detail as well in my verbal reasoning videos. So again, go to the Easy 11 Plus homepage on YouTube, look at the reasoning videos, and there's lots about synonyms and antonyms. I'm getting a warning message saying my monitor is about to turn off. That would not be good. Fingers crossed this doesn't break it. Good. I can still see you. Fantastic. Okay. Let's have a look at the comments for a second. Why do we have to do more than one exam in the 11 plus Robert Lomax? The 11 plus Robert Lomax sounds like a very scary exam. I wouldn't recommend sitting that one. More than one exam? Well, it depends what you mean. If you mean why do you have exams for maths and English and reasoning and so on, that's because different people have different strengths, and so they want to find out about they want to find out what different... If you're better at one thing than another, they want to give you a good chance, but also because they want to find people who have good skills across a range of areas. That does raise an interesting problem, which is it fair that, let's say, for example, someone is a fabulous mathematician but really struggles with English, that they might not get a chance to go to a grammar school because they don't do well in the 11 plus. And I think there are genuine issues there, but not ones that we can solve during this session. If you mean why do you have to have different exams for different schools and so on, different schools set different kinds of exams, it's just the way it is. However, if I were taking the 11 plus, I think I would like that, because if all the schools shared the same exam, that would mean that if I turned up there that day and just had a bad day, then all of it would be messed up. Whereas with there being several different exams that you might have to take, you get a few different bites of the cookie. Invented metaphor, not a very good one. So there's an upside to it as well. Helmina KM, I apologise if I've pronounced your name incorrectly, says, could you read the passage twice if you don't understand the questions? Yes, you could, and it's really good to take more time at the beginning of the exam if you don't properly understand things. However, there is a point where you've spent enough time looking at the passage and the questions that if you haven't fully understood it at that point, you're running out of time, you better get on and write some answers, even if you don't have full understanding. So do take the time to understand well, but think about your exam technique. At some point you have to get on with just answering them, even if you don't fully understand, because if you don't answer the questions, you don't get any marks. But that, of course, is obvious. Another good question from Almina, which popped up. What is algebra? I'm in year 4. I did a video about algebra a couple of weeks ago, which might be interesting, but it doesn't look at the absolute basics. I would put what is algebra into your YouTube search and find a nice basic video that shows you the beginnings. And I hope you find it interesting. Okay. One more good question I'd like to answer in the comments. Is there negative marking? Negative marking means they don't just give you marks for good things, but they actually take marks off for bad things. In almost every circumstance, no, they're just looking to give you positive marks for good things. The one exception I can think of is with creative writing tasks, where, let's say, you write a wonderful story, but it's full of English mistakes, and in effect, the English mistakes do mean that you lose marks that you would otherwise have got. So that you could see that as an example of negative marking. Some people would dispute that. You could explain it in different ways. Apart from that, not really. Outside creative writing, there aren't really any negative marking situations at 11 plus. Interesting question. Right, what's next? Okay, next one's question 11. Can you please cover surface area? Yes, I think somebody else asked pretty much the same thing. Thank you, Abby. I will cover surface area. Lots of people want it. What is 10 exclamation mark? Everyone's asking me these maths questions. Okay, 10 exclamation mark means 10 factorial, which means 10 times 9 times 8 times 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Not that times 1 makes any difference. I'm not going to work that out off the top of my head here, but you can. That's what 10 exclamation mark means. You can do that with any number. So, 5 factorial is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2. You get the idea. Hello Robert, please can you advise on how to get my daughter prepared for 11 plus English test as she finds English comprehensions hard? I've bought your RSL books and she has started practicing that. Well, I'm delighted you bought my books, and if any of you haven't bought my books and haven't signed up to 11 plus Lifeline, and why not? No, only joking. There are lots of good resources out there you can use. You don't have to use mine, although of course if you're wise you will. Anyway, I'm delighted that CK has bought my books. I think the best thing with this question is to refer you to my comprehension videos. If you go to the Easy 11 Plus homepage and look at the playlist for comprehension videos, there's already lots of advice there that should help you, and I'll be adding lots more videos on comprehension over the coming weeks and months. So I would have a look at those. More generally, if you're using my resources, probably the most useful thing about my resources, whether it's my books or 11 Plus Lifeline, because I've two things that have different material. My books are books, and 11 Plus Lifeline, you sign up online and I email you stuff every week, and they've got different things in, so they don't repeat, in case that's something you're wondering. Anyway, one of the main things about my resources is they've got really detailed answers. So there's always an example answer and an explanation of how to put an answer like that together, and advice about how to mark an answer and so on. So don't just do the questions and then quickly mark and then work out what the mark is, but what I suggest is that you do each paper or even do each question and then spend a lot of time with the answer sheet. Look at the example answer, compare it to what you wrote and say, well, could I improve that? Are there ways I can make that better? What have I done that's even better than the example? How could I make this better? Maybe write a new version with some improvements in using my advice, and that way you'll use the RSL books to give yourself the best chance of actually becoming someone who's really skilled at doing comprehension. Probably the last thing to say is if you find 11 plus comprehension very hard, I've got another book for slightly younger children which is called RSL 8 plus to 10 plus comprehension, and that leads into the 11 plus with some slightly more basic skills, so that could be a good place to start if you find the 11 plus work a little bit overwhelming. What have I put about this? Oh yeah, actually there was something else I wanted to talk about for this question, because it raises a number of useful things. When I was working as a tutor, over time the method that I worked out, which I found most effective for teaching pretty much everything, was rather than just giving a student a task to do and sort of watching them do it and then talking about what they've done, what I did instead is I started to give myself the same task. And so the student would sit here and I'd sit there, and we'd both take 5 minutes, say, to write a really good answer to the comprehension question. And then we'd swap answers and we'd mark each other's work and we'd talk about it. And we'll say, well, who's done what better? What lessons could we learn from each other? And that's really useful for the student when I've done something a bit better, because then they can then copy it and they can see how it's done. And it's not just a book telling it, but it's a real person who's actually done this while they've been sitting there. It also means they can copy the odd thing by looking over my shoulder, which is a really useful way to learn things for a bit of sneakiness. But also sometimes they did something that I had not thought of. And then when a student does something that's better than the teacher's work, then that's an amazing confidence boost, and it shows them that all this stuff is possible. Now, even if you aren't confident, I've got no idea about your background or your personal academic strengths, but let's say, for example, that you don't feel confident doing this because you think that your comprehension skills aren't as good as your child's. In that situation, this is still really useful, because the point is not to show your child a perfect comprehension answer. The point of this is to get them used to looking at someone else's work, spotting what's good, spotting what's bad, and then taking those skills into the way that they look at their own work. And I've had so many families that have told me that using this method themselves with their children has made a huge difference. You do not need to do this all the time for every piece of work. Just sometimes, when your child is working on something, sit down with them, do the same question next to them, compare the work, and even if you do this once every month for a couple of questions, it can make a huge difference. And so I really recommend this method. On the RSL Educational website, there's a page called Free Resources, and if you sign up there, I send you some special videos which actually go through this method in a bit more detail, and they're quite old videos now from a few years ago, but the advice in them is still just as I still stand by it, and they might also be useful for thinking about this way of working. That's probably my longest answer yet, but I think there's a lot in there that hopefully is worth you lot thinking about. How do you know what kind of answer a question wants? This is Gaming Princess asking in the comments. Please stop posting the same questions hundreds of times. Anyway, sorry. How do you know what kind of an answer a question wants? You need to get used to analysing a question so that you start to understand what the point of it is and what the examiner is getting at. And that's probably might be the most important exam skill. I teach it in all my videos, really, about maths and about comprehension. So I think watch my videos and you'll get some more ideas of how that works. It's also something I talk about a lot in my books, in my 11 Plus Lifeline resources. I'm always explaining how you analyse a question to work out what the examiner is looking for. It's an essential exam skill. So have a look at those places. Have a look at my other videos. Perhaps have a look at my resources. If you want to try my resources, you'll see in the video description there's a link to free resources where you can have a go at some of this stuff and see whether that way of working is effective for you. Right, I don't think I'm going to get through all 30 questions, but let's keep going for the moment. Maybe another 10 minutes or so of taking questions. Question 14. How to solve an algebra simplifying question. I do have a video on algebra from a couple of weeks ago on my channel. You can have a look at. I'm going to do more algebra videos in the future. In terms of simplifying, not something that's likely to come up at 11 plus. So I think my best advice is to put simplify equation or simplify algebraic expression or something into YouTube, into Google, and see what you find. If you want to put the word easy with your search, you'll find some introductions. But the basic principle of simplifying is really basic. I don't know, if you say something like, if I've got, 3 apples and 4 oranges and 2 apples, really I've got 5 apples and 4 oranges. So I've just simplified that. So that's what simplifying in algebra is really about. It's just taking a complicated mess of ideas and making them as simple as possible. In that case, I said 3 apples and 2 apples are really just 5 apples, and that makes it simpler. More than that, I won't cover today, because of course this isn't a maths lesson, really. What is M, V, I, C, and L in Roman numerals? Oh, see if I can do this. M is 1,000, V is 5, I is 1, C is 100, and L is 50. Google it. You'll find more details there. Martin says, I'm in my bed. I remember Martin earlier posting, I'm eating, and now Martin is in his bed. I'm waiting for Martin to post, I am asleep. I'm sure many people are asleep by this stage in the question and answer session. Two Crop says, how long is this stream? I'm sure that's because you want it to go on for a very long time, but I must disappoint you by saying that I'm probably going to stop taking questions in another 5 to 10 minutes. I'm so sorry. Right, next one. How hard is the CSSE grammar test and the Kent test? And this is from Anon. How hard? Interesting question. I think the Kent test is quite similar to quite a lot of other grammar school tests for the 11 plus. The CSSE, which stands for the Consortium of Selective Schools in Essex, so unsurprisingly, it's a test that you sit to get into various grammar schools in Essex. Is a really interesting exam, actually. I think it's quite hard just because it's different from other exams. It's not inherently harder, but you have to practice certain question types that don't turn up in many other places, such as really short descriptive tasks, sometimes even writing a set of instructions for changing a light bulb or whatever it might be. And so it does take a bit of extra practice. But it's a good exam. It's interesting. I think it teaches good skills, which is a really important thing for an exam. In terms of how hard an exam is, it's not just how difficult the questions are, it's how well you need to do to pass it, because there are some exams that are not that difficult, but because thousands of people sit them, you have to get a really high score to get into the school that you want. And so that's another kind of hard exam, and that depends on the school. Not really an answerable question, but an interesting one, so thank you. Next one. How to answer inferential questions in comprehension tests. How to prepare vocabulary. Vocabulary I've spoken about a lot already, so I'm not going to answer that anew here, though thank you, Chevron, for the question. Inference questions in comprehension. I would just refer you to my other comprehension videos, I think, where I talk about this kind of thing a lot, and particularly the written answer comprehension videos. I think we'll cover even more of this, but the multiple choice ones do touch on it as well, and I hope you find some useful advice there. Is there a way you can answer questions easily and quickly? John Sanj, this is not in any way a silly question. You might think, well, of course, just like you have to get better at them, but you can be very good at comprehension but not be fast at it, just as some of the world's really great mathematicians have actually not been that fast at doing mental arithmetic. Speed and speed of answer and quality of answer are different things. And so I take this question as being, let's say you're pretty good at comprehension. How do you be good at comprehension and fast? And I think the answer, and this I stress again and again in my videos for all kinds of topics, is that you need to have really good systems. You need to have really good processes. So you've got a question and straight away you're circling the key ideas in the question. You're looking at the number of marks and analysing them. You're working out what structure of answer you need. You're going to the comprehension passage. You're finding the best evidence. You're underlining short quotations. You've got a clear structure in your mind by now. You've got a set of quotations, and then you can write it down very efficiently, linking the quotations, the evidence into your sentences, and not writing any more than you have to, so you can move on to the next question without wasting time. You don't need to remember that. Watch my comprehension videos on this channel and you'll get an idea of these sorts of systems. But having really good systems is the most important way that you increase, is the most effective way to increase speed in comprehension, as indeed in other kinds of exam tasks. Let's have another look at the questions in the comments. Do you have any revision study techniques that have helped people to pass? If not, are there any free resources for 11 plus? I'm using yours so far. I'm very glad you're using mine so far. I mean, I feel that my videos really deal with so much of what you say there. So watch through my videos, but do the worksheets first. If you use my videos to study, for each one, take the worksheet, do the worksheet as well as you can, then watch the video, then have another go at the questions, go back to the explanations of the hard ones in the video and work like that. And I think you'll get through a lot of the things. Any revision study techniques that have helped people pass. I think you can infer a lot of, someone asked about inference, you can infer a lot of my views about study techniques from the way I explain things in my videos. But earlier on today, in this session, I spoke about how different people will find different revision techniques that work, but how you should keep it mixed. And as you mix things up, you'll find techniques that are more effective for you, but the mix will in itself help you to learn. Okay, on to another question. Okay, this is about the online ISEB exam. For anyone who's puzzled about this, it's often called the ISEB pre-test, but some schools, because of COVID, have used it as their only 11 plus exam, and it may be that some schools will continue to do this. It's a computer test, so it does look and feel rather different to doing paper exams. where can I point you to get practice for these styles of questions? The main resources that I know about would be BOFA, that's BOFA, Bond Online, I haven't tried it, but I know a lot of people use that, and Pretest Plus, who are Pretest Plus is a competitor of mine, but they do some really good stuff for pretests. I would say the balance is difficult. Pretest Plus is probably the most expensive of these, but they, from what people say, they may produce the most useful practice stuff, but you won't use them all the time unless you're very, very, very rich. So I would use those occasionally as a sort of level checkup, and then mix in some maybe slightly less expensive resources from BOFA and or Bond to get used to the online styles. But having said that, I think paper reasoning practice is still going to be extremely useful for building up these skills. You shouldn't do everything on the computer, and so reasoning resources from, in books or from a service like My 11 Plus Lifeline will also be very useful for this, and then mix in some online computer practice. Good luck. Question 19. When should you start attending mock exams? Someone asked about mocks earlier and how many you should do. I think I wouldn't bother doing any mocks until there's a really good core of knowledge. There's no point going to a mock just to get a bad mark because you didn't know stuff and the report says you didn't know stuff, but you already knew you didn't know stuff. There's just no point in doing that. It just dents your confidence and your wallet. So I'd save mock exams until you're pretty close to the level that you want to be at for the exam. And I wouldn't do too many. I'd maybe do one when the exam is maybe 3 or 4 months away, perhaps, if your knowledge is at a decent level, and maybe do another one a couple of months later when you're a bit closer to sort of check your improvement. But I wouldn't rely on them too much. There's a huge emphasis on mocks these days. They're useful, but they're not the most important part of exam preparation. Don't overdo them. Focus on skills practice and development. Someone wants to ask a question about a particular question in my maths book. In that book, in that paper 6 in that maths book, there were some really hard questions, and that is a fiendish probability question. Have another look at the explanation in the book, because I do explain this in a lot of detail there, and there are handwritten example answers to help you. If that's something you like, buy my maths book, but things there to help you. And if you still don't get it, then by all means send me an email. It's robert@rsleducational.co.uk. If you can't remember that, go to the contact page on the RSL Educational website and ask me your question there, and I will do my best to give you an answer. But if you could maybe include a bit of detail about exactly what it is that's puzzling you, that will help me to answer. Let's have a look at the questions here in the comments. When is this ending? Well, as soon as you click stop if you want, but otherwise pretty soon. If you're stuck on this, Adeyemi asks, a really frequent view of my lessons, so it's lovely to have you again. If you're stuck on a 3-mark question, can you move on to the question and go back to it when you're finished? I think move on to the next question and go back to it when you're finished. Should you stay on it? Oh, it's from Hannah. So Hannah Adeyemi. Then I think if you can see that a question is going to waste time, then yeah, it's often a good idea to skip it and come back to it. That's often a really effective thing to do. If you've already spent ages on it and you've got kind of as far as you can with your thinking, and then if you come back to it, you'll waste even more time remembering what you thought, then the best thing is often just to write down what you can, give your best guess, don't like the word guess, but the best estimate of an answer that you can get based on what you know, either in the maths or in the comprehension passage, and get something down, try and get 1 or 2 marks at least, and then move on. So it depends. To recap that, if you recognise quickly that a question is going to waste time, then yes, skip it. Save it to come back to later. If you've already wasted time thinking about it, it's probably best just to write something down so you can get some marks, hopefully, and then move on. It's a matter of judgment, it's a matter of exam technique. You learn these things. Jasmine says, please answer 20 million exclamation marks. Any books you recommend for the last month? What do you do if you do everything you possibly can? But I see a lot of panic in there. It completely depends on the kind of exam. There are lots of different styles of books and resources for lots of different styles of exam, so I'm afraid I can't make specific recommendations. What I would say is it's often a good idea to keep things mixed. That's what I try to do with my resources, especially with 11 Plus Lifeline. I don't just send the same kind of paper every week. I keep the styles and so on mixed up, and that's a good way to study wherever you find your resources, whether you buy them from me or from other publishers. Other publishers are available. you'll find that if you mix things up, you'll get less bored and you'll probably learn more effectively and you'll be better prepared for surprises in an exam. So I can't recommend particular resources. It depends on what you're doing, but just keep it mixed, keep it interesting. You can't possibly learn everything and study everything, so don't stress about the fact that you can't. It isn't worth it. Just keep it mixed and keep learning. And that's all you can do. Someone has decided, Martin, who was in bed, is now listing the Norse gods. Yes. I don't know what to say to that. Is 86% a good mock exam score? Abhilasha asks. Yes, it's a fantastic score. Congratulations. Please answer, what do I do when stuck between two similar options? This is Nripendra Patwa, my apologies. I cover this loads in my multiple choice comprehension videos, and the same reasoning applies for maths. If you've narrowed it down to two options from 4 or 5, then you're already down to a 50-50 guess, which is much better than guessing between all of them. So if you still have to guess, it's still a pretty good guess. And if you make 10 such guesses in an exam, maybe you'll get 5 of them right, maybe more if you're making intelligent guesses between those two options. But in terms of the specific techniques to choose between them, see my other videos where I talk about this a lot. Look for anything with multiple choice in the title of the video, and that will help. Right, I'm just going to have a quick look through the rest of the questions I haven't answered from before to see if there's anything I particularly want to cover to help everybody here. Someone wants to know about trigonometry. It's a great question, but not really 11 plus, so I've skipped that one with apologies. Shortcuts for nonverbal reasoning, see my videos. Yeah, someone wants to know about effect questions. It's really specific, but it's a really difficult style of comprehension question. Have no fear, I have a lesson on this planned, which I'm going to record in the next week or two and post as a short video on the Easy 11 Plus channel. But if you look at my written answer comprehension videos that are already there, I think I already cover some questions of this thought. I like this question. Again, another specific one about comprehension, but it's a classic question. I have to write about my favourite character. I don't have a favourite character. I hate all of them. With a question like this, you need to think, if I did like a character, which one would I like? And that's how you need to approach it. Of course you do. And just write about that character. Then what do you need to do? Well, you need to go through the passage, find things that they do or say, underline them, write short notes in the margin saying this, this shows that they're this shows that they're that, just 1 word, 2 word notes until you've got enough points, and then write your answer, making each point with a really clear bit of evidence, and then you've got an answer. When you're writing about character or personality, the most important thing is that you write about personality. So they are tall is not a comment on their personality. When their teacher shouts at them, they feel angry, is not a comment on their personality. It's just a comment on how they feel at that moment. If you said their teacher tells them off and they feel very angry, which suggests that they struggle to contain their emotions, now you are making a personality comment, because you're taking that incident and using it as evidence to make a broader point about their personality, what sort of a person they are. And that's a vital thing. And in fact, there's a video on my channel all about personality questions in comprehension. There are various questions I've got about specific question types. Most of them, I've already done videos about them. Have a look through the channel. Someone wants to know about, scholarship exams. So if you're academically confident and you want to get a scholarship to a school, which means that you'll get probably a small discount on school fees if it's an independent school, then, well, this is normally tested actually through the same exam. So basically, you do the same exam as everybody else, but if you're one of the top, 5 or 10 people, then you get the scholarship. That's the most common thing. So you just need to practice to do better. Occasionally, there's a different exam that scholarship candidates take, which might contain some longer questions that test skills in more detail. if I may be a little bit promotional, I would say that the harder papers in my books, and certainly the challenging and advanced papers in 11 Plus Lifeline, are ideal for this kind of work and should help you with that. But broadly speaking, it's just a matter of doing your 11 Plus or 13 Plus preparation, but doing it, better than the next person, and beating them to a scholarship. But scholarships don't really matter very much. They very rarely make a big difference to school fees. If you want to save a lot of money on school fees for an independent school, that normally means that you need a bursary, and a bursary is different. A bursary is based on how much money your family has, basically, and so it's a means test. It's not normally an exam-based thing, and that's where the really big fee reductions are, but that's separate, and it's not normally exam-based. Right, questions on the side. Can we start the comprehension now, please? You think I'm going to start a comprehension exercise now after all this? How cruel to you do you think I am? How cruel to myself? No, this is not a lesson. This is just a Q&A session this week. I was away for the weekend. I was off at a wedding, so I didn't have time to prepare all this. To prepare a normal lesson with questions and worksheets and so on. And a few people over the last couple of weeks had sent me messages saying, can you do a question and answer session? So I put those two things together. So there's no lesson today. I'm just answering your questions. Martin says, can we learn about Viking gods and goddesses? Yes, absolutely. That would be a fantastic thing for you to learn about, but unfortunately not in these easy 11 plus lessons, because it is not an easy 11 plus topic. But the 11 plus is not very important. Learning about wonderful things in the world and in our history is far more interesting and far more important, in my opinion. So please do go and learn about Viking gods and goddesses, but unfortunately you won't be learning about it from me in these lessons, which is a pity. Okay. Martin says there was a spider. Lovely. I like spiders. Right. I think last question I'll answer. Mohammed asks, are independent school papers advanced? So just ending on the grammar school, independent school difference that a lot of people wonder about. Short answer, not in general, because it depends on the school. So there are a few independent schools whose exams are harder than any grammar school exams. These would be schools such as, for example, St Paul's Girls' School, Habs Boys' School, and quite a few schools of that sort who have really, really difficult exams. But your average independent school exam is probably pretty similar in difficulty to your average grammar school exam. And in fact, there are some independent schools that are not very academically competitive. They exist to give people a lot of access to sport and music and that kind of thing, but they're not that academic, and you actually don't need to do that well in the exam to get into them. So you can't generalize. There are some grammar schools that have exams that look easier than some independent schools' exams, but there are so many people applying for them that you have to get an absolutely stratospheric score to get into that grammar school. So you could say that's a very hard exam, even though the questions aren't that hard, because you have to get almost all of them right. It just depends on the school. You can't generalize. The main difference between most grammar schools and most independent schools, but there are quite a few exceptions to this, is that grammar school exams are more likely to be multiple choice based, and independent school exams are more likely to involve writing answers. Independent school exams are more likely to require a story, whereas many grammar school exams do not require you to write a story. So there are some differences like that, but there are lots of exceptions. It depends on the school. You need to find out what the requirements are for your specific school. Okay, I think I'm going to call it a day there, because that's a lot of questions, and we've been at this for about 50 minutes. And that's long enough for anybody, including me. So, time for me to sip some of my now cold coffee, which is nevertheless very welcome in this hot weather. It's been lovely to have you here. Thank you for your fantastic questions. If you found this video useful, please like it, please subscribe to the channel, please click the bell button, and I really hope to see you next Tuesday at 6 o'clock and every other Tuesday afterwards, and we'll be back with a lesson on a topic next week rather than just a Q&A session like this. Please take a moment to look at the links in the video description, which is down here on YouTube and up here on Facebook. There are lots of useful resources there, including lots of free things. And I think that's about it. Thank you very much indeed for your questions. I do apologise if I didn't get around to answering your question. As you know, I do a Q&A session in every Easy 11 Plus live lesson, so come back with your question next time and I hope I'll be able to answer it. It's been lovely to have you here, and before I lose my voice, I'm going to say goodbye and have a wonderful week.